Chapter 2, Section 3, Conditional Statements. This is Mrs. Shopper taking you through conditional statements. Our goals are to analyze statements in if-then form and to write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of if-then statements. A conditional statement is a statement that can be written in if-then form. If-then statement, symbolically, and it reads if P then Q, or P implies Q. The hypothesis of a conditional statement is the phrase immediately following the word if in most cases. And the conclusion of a conditional statement is the phrase immediately following the word then. Again, in most cases. Take time to record this chart into your notes. Unpause when you're set to move to the next slide. All right, so we're going to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of each statement. Statement A, if a polygon has 6 sides, then it is a hexagon. Your hypothesis is that a polygon has 6 sides. Your conclusion is that it is then a hexagon. Letter B, Alyssa will advance to the next level of play if she completes the maze in her computer game. The hypothesis is that Alyssa will complete the maze in her computer game. The conclusion, then, is that she will advance to the next level of play. So Alyssa will advance to the next level of play if she completes the maze in her computer game. Your hypothesis is that she completes the maze in her computer game, and the conclusion is that she'll advance to the next level of play. All right. Here we're going to identify the hypothesis and conclusion, and then we're going to write it in if-then form. So measured distance is positive. So your hypothesis is that we measure distance. All right? So we measure distance. That's your hypothesis. Your conclusion is that it is positive. So you would write if distance is measured, then it is positive. All right. And then a 5-sided polygon is a pentagon. Your hypothesis is that we have a 5-sided polygon, where a polygon has 5 sides. And your conclusion is that it's a pentagon. So if a polygon has 5 sides, then it is a pentagon. Your hypothesis is your if part. If this happens, your conclusion is, then what happens next? If-then statements have truth values. To determine the truth value of each statement, that's what we're going to be doing. If it is true, we need to explain our reasoning, and if it is false, we're going to give a counterexample. So looking at our statement, when a rectangle has an obtuse angle, it is a parallelogram. So with this, our hypothesis is that a rectangle has an obtuse angle, and our conclusion is that it is a parallelogram. Now when you look at this, our hypothesis is false, because a rectangle cannot have an obtuse angle. And so whenever you have a statement in which the hypothesis is false, so when you have a conditional statement in which your hypothesis is false, the statement is true by default, because really the conditional is meaningless since the hypothesis is not true. And so by default, when a hypothesis is false, the statement itself is true. A statement is true if and only if the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. In all other cases, it is true. And in this case, with a false hypothesis, by default, your statement is true. Letter B. If last month was February, then this month is March. So when we look at this, the hypothesis is that last month was February. The conclusion is this month is March. Last month was February. If that's true, then our conclusion is true as well, because the month of March follows the month of February. So if last month was February, and that's a true statement, then this month is March, which is a true statement, since March follows February. Related conditional statements, and we're going to spend some time, we'll practice one in our video, and then we're also going to be talking through these in class. There are 3 different related conditionals. You have the original conditionals, P implies Q. We have the converse, which flips or exchanges your if and your then statement. So instead of P implies Q, we have Q implies P, or if Q, then P. We have the inverse, and the inverse is found by negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional statement. So if not P implies not Q. Excuse me. If not P implies not Q. And then the contrapositive is formed by negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion of the converse of the conditional. So if not Q, then not P. When you come to class tomorrow, it will be very helpful to be able to tell me what the converse, inverse, and contrapositive is without taking hesitation or looking into your notes. We want you to know that you have your conditional statement. Your converse is formed by exchanging the two together, so it's basically reversing. Your inverse is negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion, and the contrapositive is both negating and exchanging the hypothesis and conclusion of the original conditional statement. Please copy this into your notes, and when you're done, move on to the next. All right, looking at related conditionals. We're going to start with the conditional statement that bats are animals that can fly. So our statement is, so when we're looking at our statement, if an animal is a bat, then it can fly. That will be our if-then statement. So our original conditional will be, if an animal is a bat, then it can fly. So I took a statement and I put it in as a conditional. If an animal is a bat, then it can fly. Our converse exchanges your hypothesis and your conclusion. So if an animal can fly, then it is a bat. The inverse negates both the hypothesis and the conclusion of your original statement. So if an animal isn't a bat, then it cannot fly. And the contrapositive negates both the hypothesis and conclusion of your original statement and exchanges them. So if an animal can't fly, then it isn't a bat. All right, and let's look at the truth values of these. So if an animal is a bat, then it can fly. That's true, because bats fly. If an animal can fly, then it's a bat. Well, that's false, because birds can fly, and those are animals. So we're going to say this statement's false, because if an animal can fly, we can't conclude that it's a bat. We could also conclude that it would be a bird. For the inverse, if an animal isn't a bat, then it cannot fly. Well, again, a bird isn't a bat, and it can fly. So this statement would also be false. And looking at the last one, if an animal can't fly, then it isn't a bat. And that's true, because bats can fly. So if it can't fly, it can't be a bat. And that statement is true as well. All right, so when we come to class tomorrow, please make sure you understand how to write a converse, inverse, and contrapositive. We're going to spend some time in class working through those. Those are important concepts as we move through, and it's probably relatively new for you. So please allow yourself some time to practice those and to work through those. Related conditionals. Have a wonderful evening.